Hi, this is Elizabeth and welcome back. We're going to look at part 2 of switches. Now we're going to move on to distributed switches, and the lab for this is actually from the vSphere for the VMware version 4 set of labs, but we've tweaked it a little bit so that it'll work for the version 5.5 of VMware. The tasks that are going to be done within this lab is we're going to remove the VM NIC, so the virtual machine NIC, from the standard switch that we created in the last section. We're going to remove that. Then we're going to create a distributed virtual switch for the virtual machine network, and then we will create a distributed virtual switch port group, and then finally we're going to migrate our virtual machines to our distributed port group. So it's going to be quite simple. Let's get on with it. First thing we're going to do is select the Properties tab here on our Configuration tab. We're going to get a pop-up. We're going to then select our Network Adapters tab and go ahead and look at our VMNIC. We can then go ahead and select Remove to remove that. That is going to go ahead and bring up a warning window for us. It's just to let us know that by removing this VMNIC it's going to cause some issues, so we're going to go ahead and click yes for that. And as you can see, our VNIC has now been removed, so we can close that window. And now we can go ahead and go on into creating a distributed switch. So we've taken that VMNIC away, so next what we're going to go ahead and do is go into our networking. So to do that, we can see up top here, go ahead and click that arrow, give you a list. We're going to select networking from that list, and once we're in the networking, we can go ahead and get rid of that introduction page. We're going to go ahead and right click our training, our data store, and then go ahead, our data center, and then go ahead and select our vSphere distributed switch, so we can go ahead and make a new one. That'll bring up a pop-up window. You've got the different versions for your EXXIs or for your hosts, so select the one that's appropriate for you. For me it's the 5.5, so I'm going to go next on that one. And then we're going to give it a name, and for this we're going to go VDS, Virtual Digital Switch, and I'm going to name it 01, just because I only have one at this point, and this is the first one. We're going to change the number of DV uplink ports from 4 to 2. And this is because we actually are only going to be putting one adapter on that, so we really only need 2 uplink ports on our switch. It's mainly for our production line, it's not for anything else. We would create another port group for our iSCSIs and another one for our vMotion. So we're going to go ahead and click next on that one, and here we have the hosts, and we're going to add them now because we're not going to add them later. And so then we can go ahead and expand our host just to see what next we've got available. And as you can see, my EXXI1 has got 2 because I removed VMNIC1 from the standard switch that we had created before. EXXI2, as it has a standard switch on it, it only has one free NIC available, and that's VMNIC2. We can collect the view details next to that, and we can go ahead and see the details of those physical adapters, of those NICs. Once we've done that, we can hit next, and then from in there we can go ahead and uncheck automatically create a default port group, because we're going to do that manually, and then click finish and wait for the system to update, and it will go ahead and create this distributed switch. As you can see, it's in progress there. If we look at our recent tasks, look at that, it has been created, our virtual distributed switch. Our next task is to go ahead and create a new port group. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and right click on our VDS01 and select a new port group, and you'll get a wizard that'll pop up to help you run through creating this. And so once we've got that up, we can go ahead and give it a name, and this is going to be replacing our virtual standard switch, our production virtual standard switch. So we're going to call this one production, and we're going to give it a different name. I'm going to give it production Liz. My name is going to put in the end there, so it's my production switch, and you can see it's been created. The port group is right there. Go back to our host and clusters view under configuration. You'll see that we have no adapters attached anymore to our vSwitch 1. We can go ahead and click on our vSphere distributed switch, We can see that we've got the production switch there. We've got one NIC adapter. We can go ahead and select the icon there. We can go ahead and see all the properties of our virtual digital distributed switch. And we can see the that it's supported maximum number of ports that it has of 512. We've got number of ports of 2. The version 5.5, that it's VMware. We can go ahead then and select the information next to our production, and we can see the properties of that tab, the properties of that port group. You can show all the policies, what's allowed, what's not allowed, the security. As you can see, we've got security at the highest level. Everything is rejected, nothing's going to come through. We'll have to change that later. And then we can go ahead and go on over and select our information there, which will show us number of ports, 4. We have all the policies that are basically migrated over there from the parents. They migrate down, and so that's our beautiful view of that. So if we go back over to our networking, what we can do now is we can migrate all of our virtual machines over to that production port group. And so what we need to do here is we just go in and we right click on our our VDS01, select migrate, and again you have your wizard that pops up. As you can see on this first screen, it shows you the source network and the destination network, and what we want to do is make sure that in the source we select the option for our where our hosts, our virtual machines are currently sitting, and then where we want them to go. So we're going to go ahead and change our source from production list to our production network, because that's where all of our VMs are sitting on that port group. When we hit next, we have the option to select all of our virtual machines, which we'll go ahead and do, and then we can select next. And then on this final page, it just shows us the review of what's going to happen, that there's 4 machines that we're going to migrate from our production port group, which is on our virtual standard switch, over to our virtual distributed switch to our production port group there. Click finish, and if we monitor the recent tasks pane down the bottom here, we can go ahead and see the reconfiguring of the virtual machines and then them being migrated over to our new virtual distributed switch. And if we click VMs, we can see they're all there, they're all powered on. We've got some good space going. You can go back to our hosting clusters, we can have another look view there. You can see that we've got 4 virtual machines now sitting on our virtual distributed switch, all ready to go. And that is virtual distributed switches. Now, I did say at the beginning that I was going to discuss some of the pros and cons of the differences between a virtual distributed switch and a virtual standard switch. Now, to be honest, it really depends on the size of your virtual network. If you've got a huge network, then virtual distributed switcher would be the way to go, because then you can have multiple hosts and multiple VMs using the same switch, rather than creating individual switches on the individual hosts. The virtual distributed switch does have more features than a virtual standard switch, and but it is harder to set up. I did try and go through adding iSCSI to this, and that was a total disaster. So there are tutorials and labs out there that will walk you through putting iSCSI onto your virtual distributed switches. And so you've got to remember that, as I say, a virtual distributed switch, or a VDS, is easier to manage but harder to set up. A virtual standard switch is easy to set up, harder to manage. So you just have to weigh up the pros and cons of your network, what you want to accomplish within your network, and choose the best option for you. Try playing with both and see which one works out better. The only thing I would advise is that for a VDS, if the vCenter fails, you've got no way to control your virtual distributed switch, because you can't access it, you can't play with it. You can't putty into them. There's no back end into them. So, as I say, it depends on your network. It depends on what you want to achieve. But I would advise you all to have a play. And thank you so very much for listening to me ramble on about switches. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you.